The right of the citizen against torture has therefore to be admitted as part of the fundamental right to life itself, and shall not be admitted to any exceptions whatsoever under international and comparative law. In practice, however, it remains one of the most frequently violated rights worldwide. Of late, ironically, torture has even acquired a more decent name as enhanced interrogation techniques, thanks to the Bush administration in America. Despite being the largest democracy in the world, India has to go a long way forward in completely eliminating torture and ill treatment within its boundaries, I admit. There are many studies, official as well as non-official, who reveal the terrible picture of blatant violations of human rights of persons while in police and judicial custody. The Asian Center for Human Rights studies based on the official data provided by the National Human Rights Commission of India indicate that 14,231 persons have been killed in the last decade from 2001 to 2010 while in custody. This would mean that more than 4 people are being killed each day. Out of these deaths, 1,504 occurred while in police custody, and the rest, 12,727 in judicial custody. Majorities of these deaths can rightly be attributed to custodial violence. This itself is an alarming situation, whereas we must also appreciate that this suggests only to the tip of the icebergs, because a large number of custodial deaths are not even reported to the National Human Rights Commission. And again, this NHRC, as per the Section 19 of the Human Rights Protection Act, does not have any jurisdiction over the armed forces, whereas many complaints are being raised against them also. The recent experience of Soni Sori, a tribal teacher in the Maoist affected Chhattisgarh state in India, has drawn many criticisms from across the globe against the inhuman practices of tortures practiced even today. She was alleged to have supported the Maoists, was arrested by the local police, was persecuted and sexually tortured, the heinousness of which is beyond words of description in this forum. The more disturbing fact is that she had apprehended such a treatment from the local police and had even approached the Supreme Court of India to get her sufficient assurances of being protected, which was blatantly violated by the officials on the very first day when they got her in custody. Though I can justify my country that ours is a very vast country and these are only instances of exceptions or aberrances, I admit that there is certain reason to worry. Violence is a part of the civic life in most of these Maoist areas, and the people have in a way accepted violence as their fate, as their plight. When we normally talk of tortures, we mostly do so with regard to tortures perpetuated by the state's organs. We may have a feeling that Maoists and other such groups are praised to such atrocities of the state. But as my friend from Philippines has already stated, the world outside must know that the violence and barbaric tortures or ill treatment practiced by the Maoists themselves are beyond description. They run parallel judicial and law and order systems in almost 200 districts of India in the name of Jan Adalats or people's courts, where they can order even capital punishments for the slightest of offenses. Tortures and sexual violences inflicted by the Maoists upon the poor tribal people on whose behalf they claim legitimacy is a well-known phenomenon. The police and paramilitary organizations in such areas under tremendous pressure, both politically from the top and socially from the people whom they are supposed to protect. And this stressful situation is something which we can't imagine. All our normal ideas of rule of law and democracy have absolutely no meaning in such stressful situations. So I must say that the state's torture is primarily a response to the more severe and inhuman culture of violence of those who challenge the state. However, when we see things from a larger perspective, we must appreciate that the unquestionability of citizens' rights is the first level of protection against any form of torture. The Constitution of India, through its Article 21, has made the right to life and personal liberty a fundamental right, protecting the people from any infringement upon it from the part of the state. The judiciary, through its various progressive judgments all these years, has also done its part quite well, extending the scope of this right to life to include protection from torture and ill treatment of all sorts. India is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. We signed it in the year 1997. Although around 146 countries worldwide have already ratified the convention, I must admit that India has been so far largely reluctant to bring in a separate domestic legislation for ratification purpose. We realize this has affected our international image and has even raised many questions regarding our claim as one of the most liberal democracies in the world. It is in this context that the government of India has of late decided to come up with the Prevention of Torture Bill 2010, which was passed by the lower house of the parliament, the Lok Sabha, and is under consideration by the upper house, the Rajya Sabha. The law, as passed by the Lok Sabha, is under severe criticisms from many quarters. Interestingly, not all criticisms come from the same angle. The right-wing political party of our country, the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, criticizes the bill as unwarranted, as according to them, it handcuffs the police officials who are acting against the terrorists and criminals. It's not a matter of surprise at all, because worldwide, all right-wing organizations and fascists look forward to a brutal police state to combat their manufactured enemies. They first manufacture enemies and they want some machinery to combat it. That's the nature how fascists work all over the world. However, there are some legitimate criticisms that comes from various human rights and civil society groups that the bill in its present form is ineffective to contain the custodial torture and punish the actual wrongdoers. The Rajya Sabha, the upper house, has therefore sent the bill for the consideration of a parliamentary select committee. I would shortly comment upon what are the flaws in the bill as it is now. There are some 4 or 5 contentious issues. The first is regarding the very definition of the term torture as it appears in the bill. The clause 3 of the bill defines torture as an intentional act which causes grievous hurt or danger to life, limb or health. The grievous hurt term is again defined in the section 320 of the Indian Penal Code to include extremely serious injuries such as permanent loss of eye or ear, emasculation, bone fractures or hurt that causes severe or debilitating pain for 20 days or more. However, given the nature of torture that's usually practiced in our police stations, this definition is far from being effective to book the real culprits. For example, electric shocks does not come under this category. The waterboarding, sexual assault, deprivation of food, water or sleep, whipping, rubbing chilies on even sensitive parts of the body. These are all the things that happen inside a police station. So such barbaric acts, those that are readily condemned by most reasonable people, may not amount to torture as they might not inflict any grievous injuries. In short, a very high threshold has been set for an act to qualify as torture. Additionally, the bill is cynically silent on other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment whose prohibition is an essential requirement under the United Nations Convention. Another second criticism is about the clause 4 of the bill, which states that even if an act qualifies as torture, it will be punishable only if it is committed for the purpose of extorting any confession or any information that may lead to the detection of an offense. If a police officer assorts to torture in order to intimidate a person or to extort money from him, or to simply teach him a lesson, that does not come under the ambit of the torture as it is defined in the bill. So unless torture is inflicted for the purpose of extracting some information or evidence, the proposed law will refuse to take notice of it. The third important criticism is regarding discriminations. We know that systemic torture stems from discrimination of various kinds. In the Indian context, especially, minority groups like Dalits, Muslims, tribals, and sexual minorities like Hijras are more prone to torture than others. This third major area of dispute with regard to the law in its present form is related to the conditions that makes the victim responsible to show that the torture inflicted upon him was based on some form of discrimination. It is the responsibility of the victim to show that he has been tortured based on certain kinds of discrimination. So ideally this should be an independent criterion rather than an additional one as it is in the UN Convention. The fourth contentious issue is with regard to clause 5, which requires that a court can entertain a complaint only if it is made within 6 months of the date of the offense. This is totally unacceptable, as we know that victims of torture tend to be vulnerable people who often need a lot of time to overcome the physical and psychological trauma, find support, organize resources, and gather courage to make the complaint. Even as a general rule, we all know that criminal laws tend to prescribe no time limits whatsoever. So there is another issue with regard to clause 6 that prohibits a court from taking cognizance of a complaint without prior sanction of the government. And there is no scope for any independent investigating agency. The state entrusts the responsibility of investigation upon the very agency that is mainly at the against accusation has been made. So this may act as a powerful shield for the government officials, and it's against the spirit of the UN Convention. However, having said all these, I feel happy to say that the Select Committee of the Rajya Sabha in its report has asked for a thorough revision of the Prevention of Torture Bill before it is finally legislated. This is despite the fact that the committee was headed by a member from the ruling party, and now he is a minister in the Union Cabinet also. I feel that this is actually the strength of Indian democracy. Though the government has not opted or opened its mind on these recommendations, I am very much hopeful that we would soon have a good and effective anti-torture law in place. I also congratulate at this moment the Asian Human Rights Commission for the valuable inputs and interventions they have been taking all this throughout this process. And as a young legislator, I offer my full support to make this law a reality in the near future. However, I feel that we should not be contented with a law in place alone. We may tend to find easy answers to eliminate torture through strengthening our legal framework. But such quick fix solutions may not be the most ideal always, and is sure to fail us in achieving the desired objective. We may have to go deep into the issue and find out its roots in the overall violence in the society. We need to approach the issue from its political, sociological, and scientific perspectives too. A feudal and patriarchal society, as opposed to a more democratic one, is intrinsically tending to be violent, and this violence may easily be manifested as torture when it is supported by the power structures operating within that society. Up to what extent a society accepts violence is a test of how far it is democratized in the true sense. Therefore, according to me, any fight against torture is to be seen as a part of a larger struggle for democratization of our own societies. Sir, I come from Kerala, the southernmost state of India. Kerala has been a model state for many reasons. We have some human development indices that can be compared with many of the developed Western countries. Though societies like Kerala have traditionally been more democratic, and effectively checked many atrocities against the feeble sections like Dalits, of late there are some alarming signals that need some introspection from our side. There are increasing incidents of religious fundamentalist groups trying to impose their perverted social outlook upon the multicultural society, especially when it comes to relationships between men and women and other gender issues. We call this cultural policing. And I believe that this is basically an issue of somebody not being able to change with the times, and somebody not being able to understand how the world goes forward, and somebody not being able to accept others' version of truth, others' opinions. So such reactionary tendency is a potential threat to any modern democracy, and we see it as a real challenge. Even political violence, as my friend has already said, is a matter of disgrace in many parts of India and even in Kerala. Far-left organizations like the Maoists are not the only ones who resort to political violence. Even the established left parties who regularly take part in our democracy, who contest elections, who have even the chief ministers, who have even the ministers in various states of this country. These established political parties also resort to political violence. For example, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, in its stronghold states like Kerala, West Bengal and Tripura, have occasionally gone the same way as the Maoists and terrorists in perpetuating political violence. The world outside may be surprised, I believe, to hear that these parties who said to operate in a democracy have in fact established party villages. You need to get the approval of the local party unit if you want to sell your property. If you want to conduct a marriage in your family, if you want to conduct a marriage between your son and somebody else's daughter, you need to get the prior consent of the local party chief. So this is the actual thing that happens in these party villages. I think many of you may be surprised to hear such things happening even today. And the party systematically eliminates their political enemies. There are a lot of political killings happening in our country. They may do it either through their own cadres or may outsource it to outside mafia gangs and all. Quotations, mafia as we call in our state. So, though due to its... So, these are things that are concerning us very much. You must understand that though due to its more than 400 years of foreign rule, India couldn't boast of a democratic culture extending back to centuries. We had the fortune of having perhaps the most non-violent movement to earn our freedom from colonial exploitation. Through this freedom struggle, the country was also initiated to the modern ideals of democracy and civil liberties. Mahatma Gandhi, who led this noble struggle, put forward the concept of satyagraha, meaning steadfastness on truth, as the new way, or perhaps the only way, to fight injustices of all kind. This concept is fundamentally different from the idea that the end justifies the means, which was often quoted by perpetrators of violence as a justification of their acts. Gandhi had a firm conviction that his Swaraj or self-rule wouldn't be complete unless the most feeble and the most marginalized citizen feels that he or she too have a stake in the way his country is being governed. Such an engagement of the ordinary people with the power hierarchies is fundamental to any functioning democracy. The victory of the Indian independence movement opened a new era of democracy and civil liberties for the entire world. I therefore believe that in any fight against torture and ill treatment anywhere in the world, the life and message of Mahatma Gandhi could be a source of inspiration for all of us. Again, after gaining independence, India under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar achieved considerable progress in reinventing itself as a modern democratic state with the largest written constitution in the world as its guiding spirit. Over the last 6 decades, democracy stabilized in India in huge contrast to other countries in the region. Legitimate political leadership elected through regular and transparent elections, an independent judiciary, clear division of powers between the various branches of government, a free press, and a vibrant and engaging civil society have all added to making Indian democracy dependable and meaningful. India may perhaps be the most diverse nation in the world in terms of the rich and varied identities of its 1.2 billion people. Based on what attribute one takes for classification, I believe that each Indian can be considered as belonging to a minority. Because if we take religion as the criteria, you may say that Hindus constitute around 80% of the population. But within the Hindu religion, there are around 6,400 castes, subdivisions. So if we take each of the subdivisions, everyone is a minority. I am speaking Malayalam, which is spoken by only 3 crore people out of the 30 million people out of the 1.2 billion people. So if we take the language as the criterion, all Malayalis, myself and Bijo, are minorities. So Indian democracy is something that accommodates all these minorities, accommodates all these pluralities. So that's the fundamental thing about our democracy and our constitution. The ideology that makes the idea of India has to necessarily absorb all these pluralities. The Indian constitution can rightly be said to be a defender of the minority democracy, with its emphasis to protect various religious, ethnic and linguistic minorities. To eliminate torture and other forms of violence, we need to hit at the very roots of the social and political context within which this violence is established. The inequity in development is a fundamental challenge. This is caused by reasons like governance failure, bureaucratic inefficiency, and insensitivity towards the rights of minorities, and so on. We can see that extremism and insurgency in India is primarily in poverty-stricken areas. So we need to give some assurance to the people. Assurance on inclusive development can act as a great contributor towards strengthening the social psyche, thereby leading to a more non-violent society free from tortures and ill treatment. So this will have a very positive impact upon the whole society. The larger power sharing between the state and its subjects is very much important in this regard. For this, we need to focus on decentralization of power structures and strengthening of local governance systems. India has legislated and constitutional provisions have been incorporated to adopt local self-governments. We call it Gram Sabha, that village self-governments. So decisions of the local nature are taken at the village level. Those decisions are having the same impact and same legal sanctity as decisions taken by the parliament. So strengthening the local governance system is very much important. So I see this as a political mission for empowering the most underprivileged, honoring their right to access public resources and fruits of development. India rightly understands this and has been pushing forward a variety of social sector and democracy strengthening initiatives. The horizons of the rights of the ordinary citizens are widened through legal entitlements like the Right to Information Act, perhaps one of the best in the world. An employment guarantee program which legally ensures 100 days employment for each household. The program is called Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. We have the Right to Education Act that gives free and compulsory education up to the age of 14. And we are contemplating on the Food Security Act. We are going to provide at least 30 kilograms of food grains per household per month. It's a legal entitlement to be in the days to come. Also contemplating upon the Right to Services Act. So I'm towards my end of my presentation, what I want to say is that in order to combat terrorism, in order to fight violence in all its forms, we must make use of science. Science can be of immense help in our fight against systemic torture and ill treatment, which are basically a manifestation of our tribal instincts. Torture as a part of criminal investigation is clearly against the development of science, especially neuroscience and similar advancements towards understanding the human mind. Neuroscientific research indicates that coercive interrogation techniques tend to be unsuccessful and may have many unintended negative effects on the suspect's memory and brain functions. It is that may not come handy for the prosecution while the case is finally brought before the court. So we must go for more scientific methods of investigation and interrogation. Therefore, it's high time that policy makers turn to such scientific concepts while formulating policies on criminal investigation and interrogation. Any law is basically concerned with regulating behavior of human beings, and therefore neuroscience dealing with how the brain works to regulate one's behavior could be of much help in formulating laws. Our police and investigation systems need to be reformed based on scientific concepts and their sociological implications. We need a concerted effort in this regard. I would wish to conclude this presentation with a wish and an appeal to join our hands together in this fight against torture and ill treatment. It's a fight to be fought globally and from different fronts. I earnestly hope that this august gathering of eminent parliamentarians and civil society representatives from across the globe turns out to be a milestone in our pursuit for realizing a society free from torture and violence of all forms. Thank you.